Welcome to a football show Monday edition. That's Paul Kuharsky. I'm Braden Gall. This is, of course, a show brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I'll get to more of that coming up in just a second. Titans fall in super ugly fashion, Paul, in D.C. against the Commanders. And there's a lot of sort of like weird parallels between the Commanders in terms of what does this say about ownership, front office, offensive, defensive coordinators, head coach, quarterback. It goes on and on down the list. Obviously, the Commanders, a team that were struggling mightily, came into this game and got healthy on a lot of fronts, and we will discuss a lot of those things and sort of what does it mean long term for the rebuild, PK, in terms of like what is an accurate calendar and what is a time frame in which fans can actually expect this franchise to sort of work its way out of the bottom, because after three really great games, not great games, three moments of progress, that became a victory over the Houston Texans. They gave it all back they gave all the goodwill back in one, not even a game, Paul, in a quarter of action. They gave it all back in the first 15 minutes of that game on Sunday. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, 20 minutes of laying down pretty much that ended any hope. And Will Levis, to paraphrase, kind of said like, we're not going back down the hill after the climbing we've done to get up. I don't think he has a say in the matter. I mean, I think whatever climbing they did, they rolled back down the hill with this game. And, I know the improvement and quarterback improvement and all that stuff is not linear, but they certainly were on some kind of incline, and they go back down now. And they've got now 5 games to reclimb. And if I'm a fan of this team, I'm just disgusted with that as a follow-up to the win in Houston. I'm disgusted with the talk of a hangover from success. One game of success and you're hungover. I mean, that one game, winning one game is not NFL success on any level. And now you're telling me that you couldn't handle the one game of success. I mean, it's such an indictment of the franchise, of where the franchise is, of the people in the franchise at multiple levels, of the players in that locker room. And it is just we come in here and we use the words catastrophic and disaster related to a lot that's gone on with this team. But I think it's the low moment of the season. And I'm far-fetched to think of what happens the rest of the way that doesn't make this a defining moment of the season, the defining moment of the season.
Well, it has to be probably the bottom of the rebuild if you're going to talk about sort of it being the bottom. We already have, if you want to jump into the comments, please do so. Appreciate all you guys already talking about the cold. Cody says it was the cold. Trevor says couldn't handle the cold. We shall see. Sam says I'm a bit burnt out, but I realized very early on that this was going to be a mulligan year. Everyone needs growth. Everybody needs growth top to bottom. I think they're doing that in the grand scheme of things. That's going to be a question, Sam, that I'm going to bring up with PK a little bit later on in the show as we discuss. I think what's interesting in Predemption, good to see you again, of course. I'm disgusted with Nashville professional sports right now, but you guys and my Irish are my therapy. So we'll do our best. We will do our best. You know, it was not atrocious or a debacle or any other sports word we like to use to describe awful performances. My Thanksgiving holiday, Paul. I hope you and the family had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Mine was wonderful. You want to know why? And this is not a cheesy answer here. It's Sinkers Beverages, because I had a Weller 12. I had that saved up because I got it from Sinkers Beverages as a part of signing up for their rewards program. I got the Weller 12 a couple of months ago. I saved it for just this occasion. I had my father and my brother-in-law, who also appreciates good bourbon. We had a little sip after dinner. It was spectacular and wonderful. My wife and my sister-in-law and my mother had a wonderful time with some random Oregonian sparkling rosé that Sinkers Beverages told me to buy. They all loved it. Huge hit. You know who came out the big winner? This guy. This guy. Because Sinkers Beverages held my hand the entire way. They gave me a nice bottle of bourbon, picked out a nice wine for me, and it was spectacular. I will say, though, and you don't really know what this is like, but after the kids didn't go to school at all last week,
Same.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but having an 8 and 6-year-old, like they are just like, I needed them so desperately to go back to school today. Like they needed their own space. They've been on top of each other's faces for like the better part of a week, and it was just like, guys, I love you so much. Get the hell out of my house. Get out of here.
You've got some fun teenage years ahead. I think Simon woke up at 1 or 2 days last week. So you forget he's in the house.
Like 1 p.m.?
Yeah, 1 in the afternoon. As a 15-year-old who stayed up playing video games or whatever, and he was a little under the weather. He needed some recovery time. Yeah, talked about having been stressed out, a little more stressed out over grades and work than I in baseball than I imagined. So he really had an enjoyable week. But I think he was bored by the end of the week and was actually not unenthusiastic about returning to school today. That said, Christmas break is not that far away either. So.
I know. So I went to high school here, and so we had 1 day of fall break, 1 day, and we had probably maybe Wednesday before Thanksgiving, maybe definitely Thursday and Friday. But right now, Metro schools, it's a full week in October, a full week for Thanksgiving, and then 3 full weeks in December, and then the first week of January. They don't go back to like the 8th, and they're off for like 3 full weeks. I love my kids so much, Paul, but that is more parenting than I signed up for. Sinkers Beverages, thank you for all your support and all these trying times and trying moments for me and my wife as parents.
And drinking some of that stuff leaves you with the actual hangover as opposed to the hangover that the Titans and Jeff Simmons were talking about having from one win.
That is a professional segue into and out of our ad read about Sinkers Beverages, award-winning liquor store, by the way, 4 times. All right, well, here was Brian Callahan. You asked him about the hangover today at his press conference, and here was what Brian Callahan had to say to that question.
No, not at all. I mean, no. We, as I even said last week, is that, it's 1 win. We haven't arrived. We haven't done anything that would require us to have to worry about that. And all we're trying to do is stack good weeks together. And I thought we were on a good trajectory, a big win on the road, and to come out and play the game the way we did was just disappointing. To go down in that game early and not be able to come back. And there's no part about anything that I feel or our team should feel is that we should have an issue dealing with that. And again, that's after the game and in the heat of the moment. But yeah, we shouldn't have had any issue. Absolutely. I mean, it all ultimately is my responsibility, and if that's the way that the team feels and something didn't go right, and whether I was aware of it or not, if that's the sentiment, that's a sentiment. And I can assure you that's been addressed.
He can assure you, Paul, that that's been addressed.
Earlier, he said, and I think reasonably so, sometimes guys in a situation like that don't know what to say and they're kind of fishing and whatever. But Jeff Simmons seems to really have that ready. Like, Jeff Simmons has a very big gaggle, the second biggest gaggle to the quarterback who goes to the podium. Jeff Simmons, everybody listens in or asks a question of Jeff Simmons, who's the big defensive post-game press conference, if you will. And he had that ready. We played like we were hungover from the Houston game, and we've got to learn how to deal with success. So that wasn't an off the cuff, like, what do I come up with here kind of thing. He had thought about that. And look, I'm always appreciative for the candor and the thoughtfulness and whatever. I just think, he's been on some successful teams, and for that to qualify as success that you need to recover from somehow is crazy. That you need to recover from success, that concept I don't get. You need to recover from all the losing. The success is something that you shouldn't have to recover from. The success is something you should need to build on. So I just, it just seemed weird framed to me. And look, the team is not where we thought it was after, we're giving it credit for 2 closer losses that were still double-digit losses to Los Angeles and to Minnesota. And then it pulled an upset win, and I think this loss, a very bad 23-point loss, in which it was down 28-0 in 20 minutes, I think does influence what we can think of those last 3 games, which to me are, a little bit of progress, an upset win that was an upset win and didn't really mark anything in the big picture growth of this team, in that it's capable of returning from that stuff and doing this.
It is any out. So I'm okay with impatient fans saying, look, this isn't good enough. Progress in a loss is not what I signed up for. Like, I understand that basic sentiment as a fan. You spend money on season tickets, you invest time and money in entertainment, you have lots of options today. And, you're not okay if you want to be impatient about progress without winning. I'm okay with that. Objectively, though, you have to look at the team and say, look, the quarterback needs progress. The coach has never called plays. The defensive coordinators never called plays. The general manager and the front office have been constructed for less than a year or just over a year. Like, everybody needs some time to build this stuff because this is a very hard job for all these different individuals. And so if you're going to show us goodwill, and Will Levis is going to take major steps forward, playing a more efficient brand of football, a more intelligent brand of football, while also taking a boatload of sacks, like in the face of that kind of pressure, but show success. And then it eventually leads to a win. And I'm not even going to argue that progress didn't eventually lead to that win. I think you absolutely could say, look, we played better, and then we got a little bit better, and then we got a little bit better, and we built to the point where we have a W over a rival that, according to your story, was an emotional win for Amy Adams-Strunk. That's all fair. But then you have to acknowledge that you gave every bit of that back in a matter of 1 quarter of football. Their drives were 3 plays, 59 yards, touchdown. 11 plays, 80 yards, touchdown. 3 plays, 24 yards, touchdown. 9 plays, 34 yards, touchdown. Those were the first 4 drives. The Titans, in those same 4 possessions, ran 10 plays for 14 yards, punted twice, and had 2 turnovers. Like, you could. We'll get to sort of the front office and the defensive coordinator side of all this, because I think they take a lot of this one. But this is one of the few areas where Brian Callahan's teams have been pretty good, which is coming out of the box relatively prepared, relatively up for it, understanding the job and the game plan. This was like the defense completely disappeared right out of the gate, and the offense couldn't recover. Although, that being said, I think J.C. Latham said it after the game, right? He said, look, we set the tone with the false start on the first play. So it wasn't like the offense did its job either. So it's just atrocious.
My fault. He said, my fault on the false start. I set the whole tone with the false start on the first place. So it's a good job by him trying to take the blame, but he didn't deserve the blame. First and foremost on this, and at least you could say Levis isn't at the, in the top 5 items of this. It's a defensive loss. I mean, they had no clue what they were doing. Cliff Kingsbury picked them apart. They played kind of soft zone. There was plenty of room for receivers to be wide open and field passes from Jaden Daniels, who was very precise with them. And then they ran. Titans pride themselves on stopping the run. They didn't stop anything. Brian Robinson looked like an all-world back. And they pulled him pretty much after 16 carries and let Chris Rodriguez go 13 carries for 95 yards. They nearly had 2 100-yard backs. They ran for 257 yards, the most anybody's run on them since 2018. And, people in the wrong gaps and, bad tackling and a combination of everything defensively, as bad an effort as you could put together. And just an embarrassment. And, forget about Dennard Walker as a head coaching candidate, which he wasn't on track to be based on how things were going this year. They dropped from 8th against the run to 16th against the run off 1 game. I mean, that's how bad this was. And, I'm very curious to see how they bounce back from this. To me, it's the kind
this is the hangover. This is the hangover.
It's the kind of game that could have you feeling like, well, what's the point going forward now? And I think a lot of fans are thinking that, what's the point now?
Ed says this team is like watching a person try to plug a leak, fix the punt block, long punt return, stop a running quarterback, give up 250. Yeah, it's the game of whack-a-mole. Like, you're just trying to, it's impossible to. Austin says Simmons will be traded by draft night, and JC will take his spot as the leader voice of the locker room. I don't know why that wouldn't have happened around the deadline. Maybe they didn't get an offer. Obviously, the Titans said he was not necessarily on the block at all.
And he's played significantly better since then. I mean, he wasn't good yesterday, but he's since the bye week, he's been back to being the kind of player you wouldn't want to trade. I don't know that they're going to be eager to trade him because once again, they're going to feel like they're a few pieces away.
The other thing about the Eddie says, is it just me or Paul's mic super quiet? Yeah, yes, it's a little quiet.
Is it? I don't know.
So
I'll play around here.
It comes in and out. Here's the thing about the defense. Context is always very important. And there's certainly plenty of context around Dennard Wilson that you could use as not an excuse, but and we're going to get to the cold. We'll hear from Callahan's response to Jarvis Brownlee's comments after the game about how cold might have played a factor. I do think that having listened to your show yesterday, that I think that Jarvis Brownlee was searching for just any grasping. I think he was grasping for an interesting, like why we weren't awake or something like that. And we'll get to Callahan's response to that in just a second. But I do think, look, your star cornerback, L'Jarius Sneed, hasn't played most of the season. Awuzie, your other starting quarterback, hasn't played most of the season. You traded away probably the best, most steady defensive front seven player, a linebacker, certainly in Ernest Jones. Like you can make some, it's his first year, like on and on and on. Like you can, there's not a lot of pass rush on this roster outside of Harold Landry, and he hasn't really been an incredibly productive player in terms of getting to the quarterback and actually affecting the pass plays. So you can put all that context around it, but at the same time, you then have to put all the context around the matchup, which is this was a team that had lost 3 straight in Washington. The story around Cliff Kingsbury is, all the talking points last week going into this game were about how this is about the time of year where everyone starts to catch up with Kingsbury's offense, and this is the cliff is where they fall off, and the rookie wall for Jaden Daniels, and all this. This is all the context around the other side of this equation, which is Washington, and they just they torched him from the word go. I mean, 6 yards a carry. You didn't even mention. You said Jaden Daniels, but 83% completion percentage, 25 out of 30. Like this was as efficient and as precise an offensive execution as I've seen against the Titans in a long time.
He was sharp. He is very sharp, and they had high percentage throws for him also. I mean, I didn't feel like he had to work super hard to get himself in position to make the throws that he made. Terry McLaurin's average catch, I think, was 8 yards, under 9 yards. And that stadium loves Terry McLaurin, by the way, chanting for him throughout, caught 2 touchdown passes. But certainly the Commanders were looking to get right. They'd been struggling. And it was, the worst case scenario in terms of fearing the Commanders getting right, a team that had played pretty well but had a dip versus a team that felt like it was on the ascent. And it came out of it with no doubt about which way it was going. The Commanders got things right. And move forward feeling good about themselves. The Titans can pretend like this was the aberration. This is a rule. They've lost big to the best teams on their schedule. And the aberrations were playing relatively close against Minnesota, against the Chargers, and the win against Houston.
We haven't even got to special teams. We'll get to that in just a second. Stevie says, I really feel like teams rather focus on stopping Pollard and letting Levis throw passes to get off the field quickly.
Levis has been throwing the ball well, and Pollard last week ran great. I mean, Pollard didn't run this week because they're behind 28 points in 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Biggest indictment on defense is not being able to fix red zone struggles. Again, they've had 1 stop in the red zone the entire season, and that was Fairbairn's miss last week by the Houston Texans.
Well, I'm not expecting them to stop field goals. I mean, you just have to force field goals as opposed to touchdowns.
Matt says a decent pass rush would solve so many of these teams' defensive issues. Do you agree with that?
I would solve a lot. I mean, Harold Landry looks like a shell of himself. He's just not an impactful player. Key emerged a little bit yesterday, gets a hand on a face mask, and automatically that's trouble. You're keyed from the inside out on asking Simmons and Sweat. Sweat has emerged a little bit to get some pass push, and Simmons, as I said, has been a much more effective player since the bye week, when I think his elbow's become a little bit less of an issue. But they don't have enough pass rush, and we say like that with that draft pick, a high draft pick that we want them to get an edge rusher with, we're looking for maybe an edge rusher 2. I think they're looking for an edge rusher 1 because Harold Landry in this scheme, the combination of scheme and how they're using him or what they're able to get out of him, and maybe just his game. I mean, when's the last time you saw him come off the edge and go, woo, like, whether he's being blocked or not, where you thought like, wow, that was some get off from the top defensive edge on this team.
I feel like there was one against like New England or something. Like there was a play maybe, but like that's to your point. Like that's what we're talking about here. So I thought this was, and I'm gonna play the response to the Jarvis Brownlee clip in just a second. But this is what I thought was an entire microcosm of where we're at with this team right now. Was a series of events. I want to kind of talk through this real fast. It shouldn't take me too long. They go down and they kick a field goal. It's 28-10. Amani Hooker intercepts a deflection, which wasn't like it was a good play, but it was also a drop technically by Zach Ertz. That's about 6:30 to go in the third quarter. They're down 28-10. They get the ball. They go 17 yards instantly to NWI. Then Tony Pollard drops a pass. Then they go the 30-yard, beautifully designed post route by Tony Pollard over the top of the linebackers, deep into Redskins territory. I think it's down on the 15. The very next play, Will Levis has to dirt it into the ground pretty aggressively. Then there's the quarterback. The design quarterback run in which you're asking Dylan Radins to pull all the way across the formation to kick out on Dante Fowler. It doesn't work at all. It's not even close. It's too slow developing, etc. And then they go, of course, with the mistake around the fumble there on the snap to the center, whether that's on Radins and whether that's on Brunskill, whether that's on Levis.
Well, here's the quick explanation for that. Skoransky was gesturing in some way, shape, or form, and it was mistook for the hand flash, which is the equivalent to hitting the center on the ass, which is their silent count per se.
A lot of them do. By the way, did I say Redskins? Obviously, I mean Commanders.
Yeah.
The one I'm seeing a lot in both college and pro is that you don't actually hit the other player. Is
right.
you just flash the arm forward into their,
which is what they're doing. And so he did something with his hand that Brunskill mistook as that hand flash and snapped it.
Then they go the Redskins. The Commanders then decide to go pretty quickly with 2 third-down conversions, very efficiently, 3rd and short, 2nd and short, passing on 1st down. They go 9 plays, 72-yard score touchdown. The whole series to me, the series of events, like basically 2.5 possessions there, that was the Titans. This whole year in a nutshell, which is you sort of find yourself in the right place. You kind of make a play, even though you're trailing. You get yourself back in the game. You make a bunch of smart plays, and then you shoot yourself in the foot, and your defense gives it up. Like the whole thing, that series felt like the whole entire season, 2024 Titans sort of encapsulated in a couple of different drives.
Yeah, and then kind of adjacent to that, they drive early second half. I guess feels like all right, they've found their footing. It's going to be very hard to make this a game, but they're back like playing level football. Now, can they chip away at it? And they get 2 field goals. Well, 6 points against that deficit is nothing. Several of them talked about winning the second half, like 12-10 or whatever it was. Who gives a shit? If you're down 28-0 in 20 minutes, the last thing I or anybody wants to hear is about you, quote unquote, winning the second half. Throw yourself a parade like you did after the Houston win. And that's that is one reason I might buy this hangover thing, is because the team was so overjoyed to present Amy with the game ball. They got to get out of this thing where winning against the Texans and winning in Houston is a Super Bowl, and actually aspire to an actual Super Bowl.
An actual Super Bowl? That's amazing. So anyway, I just wanted to let's hear from before we hear from Callahan. Tell everybody quickly what Jarvis Brownlee said in the locker room after the game about the temperature.
Yeah, so the crowd had dropped away from Jarvis Brownlee, and Nick Suss from the Tennessean and I, your other co-host, stuck around and talked to him a little bit more, and he actually said that he thought that guys didn't deal well with the cold. He said, I'm from Florida, and it affected me, and I think it affected us. Guys aren't going to say it, but I think the cold affected us. Now, it was like 41 degrees and windy. Now, there were some periodic clouds that surely made it colder than that. But that is a NFL, not a bad December or November weather condition for a outdoor NFL game by any means. And when I tweeted out, now Nick and I walked away and we're like, that is not going to go over well at all. I tweeted it out, and immediately people are saying that the weather is exactly the same in Nashville, Tennessee today. The Titans practiced in similar conditions all week, and it just did not strike me as, and I like Jarvis Brownlee's candor, and if he thinks that's what happened, that's great, but his coach didn't take it well either.
No, I want to get to that in a second, but I do want to kind of I want to poke a little bit at his answer. It did feel like he was trying to explain, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, you were there, but it sounds like he was trying to explain or talk through even the feeling of like a sleepy warm-up. Like it felt like they were kind of sleepy. They weren't fired up. Like, again, I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it felt like he was trying to figure out a way to explain why was it that we sort of felt this way in the pregame, even that it didn't feel like guys were like boom, 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 like hopping, that they were alert, that it was peppy or whatever. And then he kind of stumbled onto, well, maybe it was the cold. I know it affected me. Nobody's going to say it, but like, I feel like maybe it was the cold. And, I think you said this on your show that, he's probably going to hear from some veterans in the locker room about saying that out loud. Is that a fair assessment of how he was talking, or is it, or am I off on that?
I didn't think it was warm-up related. I thought it was dead game related. Here's what Callahan had to say it when I said, what'd you think about Jarvis Brownlee thinking that the cold was a factor?
Yeah, of course. That was alarming to me. We practiced in it all week. We were out there all week. It was colder here at practice than it was in the game. Again, if that's the case, that to me sounds like that's an excuse. But no, that was about as fair weather a game as you could possibly ask for in December. So I can't comment on where that would have come from, to be honest, Paul.
I don't think this is about Brownlee, though. That's the thing. It sounds weird to me to say this, but it doesn't feel like Brownlee was trying to make some excuse for his own bad play. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It felt like something. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, no, I think he's kind of speaking for the team, searching for something for the team. Yeah. He's a Florida guy, and he said as much in his comment, but he also played at Louisville. So, further north than Nashville, I'm sure they had some colder weather games. I'm sure he's played in 40 degrees before.
You could. Right? So I went back after I was listening to your pod. I took the dog for a walk, and I went back and watched the game to like just double check. Did not see a single bit of breath on a single player the entire time. Meanwhile, Buffalo and San Francisco are playing in like 8 feet of snow. I'm watching like a college games in the Midwest all Saturday are like 7, 8, 10, 12 degrees, like in Iowa and stuff. Like I was just like, what, the cold? Really? And Brian said it there. Like it was colder here during practice. And one of the follow-ups I had for you was it felt like Brian Callahan today was, and again, I'm with you. I like the candor. I like the honesty. Tell us about this stuff. I do appreciate that. It felt like he was more surprised and caught off guard by the way his team started this game and by the way this game unfolded than he has been across a number of different areas by any of the other losses. Like this was, I thought we practiced really well. I thought we were focused. I thought we had momentum coming off the loss. I thought the cold shouldn't be a factor because it was colder here. Can't believe that carried into the game. It felt like he was admitting this was a much bigger maybe shock to the system or surprise to him that his team played the way it did versus all the other times where maybe just Buffalo just beat their ass, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was surprised by the way things unfolded for sure. Didn't go so far as to say like guys weren't in it. I thought, I don't know, effort's always kind of a touchy issue with coaches, obviously, if guys are, but I mean, I felt like there was some shrugging of shoulders. I don't know about lack of effort, but just like lack of understanding what was going on, a certain helplessness. And helplessness is not as bad as lack of effort, but it's pretty close to where you just have no idea what to do or how to change it.
So I do want to ask a couple of other questions, sort of bigger picture outside of the game. But I do, yeah, Matt says, I think it was a shock. I do want to, Levis once again, I think is sort of, and again, this is just my take on it, my opinion on it. Every week that goes by where he puts up these types of numbers or is sort of showing command of some situations, understanding things a little bit better, maybe executing things a little bit more efficiently, sort of the positive small steps, despite the entire team taking 2 major steps back, if not 3. It does feel like another week has gone by where you go, all right, I think Levis in 25 is the right person for the job for now. I know you and I both have been on the sign a veteran backup to give him some competition, but that a cheap rookie deal and a third-year player, second year in the system, it seems like making the team around that player, regardless of what he does next year, he's sort of earning the right. And every week that goes by where you go, Levis was okay. Levis was solid. Levis created some opportunity. Levis didn't have any big mistakes. I know that's not what you want eventually in a starting quarterback, but I think for next season, it's 4 weeks in a row now where I go, I think Levis is your starting quarterback next year.
37 pass attempts and, no disasters for starters, which is a good thing. Pass protection wasn't bad. He got sacked twice. He negotiated the pocket, I think, okay. And in a game with 37 dropbacks, for him not to be amongst the problems, I'm not saying that, hey, that's a big win, but I thought he played okay. He didn't stay on the trajectory he's been on the last 3 weeks. I wouldn't go that far. But didn't drop off, in line with the drop off of a lot of other elements of the team. So I'm with you right now. Levis is fine. Last couple of weeks has been better than fine, and they got other problems that are bigger, more significant, and need more high level addressing this week if they're not going to be a laughingstock next week and losing to the Jaguars.
I mean,
you got to beat the best to be the best. They say, well, you got to beat the worst to not be the worst. Is what this game is.
Yeah, and maybe having a new special teams coordinator is part of that plan. Matt said better pocket presence and threw balls away. Finally, I do think that was the issue against Houston, right? It was navigating the pocket, maybe stepping up a little too soon, not throwing the ball away a couple of times when he should have. And again, to take something that went wrong, even in a win where you played well, to take something that maybe you could do better and then tangibly put on the film the next week progress in those particular areas, I think is, if you're a coach, that's what you're looking for, right? You've got 32 different ways to grade him out. And if you've graded out as an F 1 week in one category, you come back and get a C+ or a B-, well, that's improvement in those categories that he sort of does seem like he focuses on from week to week. Again, do I think he is a guy who can carry a franchise to a championship? No, I don't think so. Do I think he's earned the chance to be the starting quarterback next year? Probably, unless he's got a 5-game stretch where it just reverts back to all of the problems and he shows no progress. Which, again, I reserve the right to change my opinion if new information has come to light, man.
Right. Me too. But it seems unlikely if we're forecasting for that to happen, considering that he did reasonably well against, Chargers and Vikings when he's got, 2 Jaguars and a Colts and at Cincinnati, none of them great defenses compared to a lot of the teams he's played against this year.
Yeah, and the pass rushes on all those teams very good as well. Okay, so before we get into the final question about the game and then a bigger question about the franchise, I just want to say thank you to Sinkers Beverages for another year of amazing support to not only 440 Sports and to all you Titans fans, but also to all you Preds fans. They're one of the main supporters of our Predators show, The Gold Standard. They're also they support all the other shows across the 440 Sports Network, the Music City Audible with the Justins. They also are a big part of the Hot Read podcast with Easton and Stoney. Sorry, JT and Stoney. Oh, big mistake by me. I called them the Redskins today. Like, what am I doing? Maybe I'm the one who needs to go back to school today. And of course, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Man, I made my Thanksgiving holiday. I know JT went and got some Shotgun Willie's Barbecue for his Friendsgiving in town, and I saw some photos of the brisket and the turkey. The brisket was a huge hit with the family and with the friends. Huge hit with the side, the Tony's Magic Green Beans. I'm telling you, I don't know, Paul. I think sides they're important. They're not the reason you go to a barbecue joint, but they're important. But green beans are my number one. I know people love mac and cheese. People love coleslaw, mashed potatoes, all that other stuff. But green beans are like my barbecue jam side item. And they make them, they're real peppery. They've got a little brisket in there. They got the bacon fat. Like, give me the green beans. Do you have a favorite barbecue side item that you go to?
It depends on where I am eating largely. I like a 3-bean salad, a vinegary 3-bean salad.
Perhaps a grits casserole.
No, a vinegary 3-bean salad
Okay.
is my thing. I'm not a fan of the southern green bean that I imagine is what you're talking about with the heavy on the bacon fat. That's not my.
Well, what's interesting is I would not consider myself like a heavy southern side item guy in general. But a great spicy, like cooked in, and it's not like heavy on fat. It's just cooked with the meat, right? It's got a little bit of like brisket pieces in there or bacon pieces in there or whatever. My wife's, my mother-in-law, my late mother-in-law used to make a vinegary string bean with like bacon pieces on top of it. And it was always, that
That's
sour. Awesome. It was like a sweet and sour, but with like a, with like some meat. You got to get some meat in there if you're going to cook in the South. Anyway, green beans, Tony's Magic Green Beans, spectacular. They're my favorites. I ate some again today. I'm still eating off the entire tray of green beans that we had. I went to like 8. I think I'm at 8 cold turkey sandwiches off the turkey breast. Little sourdough, Grey Poupon mustard, some dill pickle, and thin slice so you can eat a lot of it. But I think I'm on sandwich number 8. So Shotgun Willie's Barbecue back open again Wednesdays through Sundays, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. All right, the blame game here is fascinating to me. We can talk about the defense. I think that's a big one. I think the other one is sort of the stark contrast between Adam Peters, the general manager, who was in the mix in terms of the Titans being interested in hiring him when they hired Rand Carthon. He immediately said, "No, thanks, I'm good," and took the Washington job and has done. Look at the
a
draft
year later.
class. Look at the draft class, just a fantastic draft class for Washington and the job they've done. He hires Dan Quinn. That franchise has been turned around very quickly post Dan Snyder. This is one of the few games. I don't really put games on the front office very often in general. The defense was so bad that I think Dennard Wilson wears this one more than anybody. I think the sloppiness in the special teams is actually now on Brian Callahan. Honestly, 12 penalties and bad special teams. He's not doing anything to fix the special teams, so that's on him. In my opinion, now it's no longer on Anderson, who's just, kind of dead man walking at this point. But I do think you're allowed to look at the quick turnaround, the progress that franchise made in Washington versus the investments in the quick turnaround or lack thereof with this franchise. I think this game actually has a little bit more front office flavor to it than I think some other games have had.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote that in my column from the game. Adam Peters took over a situation that's uglier than the Titans situation, had been for a long time. Been on the job a year less. Obviously had number 2 pick and got himself a quarterback that's been very good so far. But he made Rand Carthon's team look like a JV team. And so, that's a big front office win there. And I harkened back to Mike Vrabel made a joke with Rand Carthon at Rand Carthon's introductory press conference about getting me a return guy. And they've failed to, they can't find a return guy. I don't think it's that hard to find a return guy. I don't think return guys around the league that's 5 fumbles for Jaquan Jackson this season. He hasn't lost all of them.
How is he not cut already? Like, honestly, I'm not trying to be rude to him, but like,
they're not going to cut the draft pick and that, but he's got to be benched. And he was only benched for kickoffs because they don't have another guy on the game day roster anyway, who can in their estimation field the punt and do anything with it. Tyler Boyd can field the punt and not do something with it, which is a better alternative. I would think Mason Kinsey's on the roster on Sunday against Jacksonville and could be on the roster, which would be great for him because he needs 2 games for a pension. To be on the roster and if not just this week for the rest of the way. They also didn't Callahan didn't eliminate the possibility of them looking outside, but that's been a disastrous position for a good part of 2 regimes. And you go back and look at Phillips. Phillips was another guy they brought in and expected to be a good returner who crumbled. So there's something in the water lately.
Well, and the other thing is a lot of people, and I think this is actually a fair debate when you say, well, what were we supposed to do with all that cap space, right? I think the Predators fans are saying this right now as well with the team that's in last place, and they spent over $100 million in free agency to make them better. Well, what are you going to do with that cap space? You got to spend it on something. It's not my money, right? That's kind of a common refrain, which I think is actually a fair thing to say. If you've got a ton of cap space, it doesn't do you any good, really. Now, the NFL, you can roll it. In the other leagues, you can't roll it as much, but you can roll some of it. But it would cost you a lot less, hypothetically, than a number 1 corner, number 2 corner, or even a number 1 receiver. I'm not saying they shouldn't have gone and got those guys. But in theory, if you did not go get one big ticket item, whoever it might be, in theory, couldn't you have made the bottom 8 spots on the roster significantly better by definition? Like, isn't that where that money could have gone? If you always ask, like, hey, what are you going to do with that money? It's not mine. You got to spend it somehow. Couldn't you have spent it on making the roster more balanced top to bottom instead of adding star pieces at the top? I don't think fans would have liked that strategy in the offseason at all, but that is something that the front office could have done.
Well, that doesn't add up to much. I mean, I don't know what the number is. I think they might have $22 million still free. And you're talking about an $8 million expenditure to get those last 8 guys better, or 12 even, instead of them being undrafted rookies or, bottom of the barrel guys. So you could have done both, or you could have had one less guy and redistributed that money. Right. So it didn't have to be one or the other. They certainly did not handle the special teams portion of the depth of the roster with enough importance. And will Rand Carthon admit that? I highly doubt it. He better admit it through what he does with the bottom of the roster for next season. Otherwise, he'll really be indicting himself. But also, Jaquan Jackson was not, if I recall correctly, especially effective returner at Tulane.
No, he was not. He was injured.
So they're projecting. They're projecting. Don't project. Go get somebody who's done it and done it well, so that you can at least say, this guy was good at it in college. We have cause to expect him to be good at it in the pros.
Yeah. It's just something that hit me to your point when you do the math on it. Yeah. I think it's like a $10 or $12 million expense. And then you save a little bit of money on some of those players that they replace. And then maybe there's one piece in there, middle of the, maybe it's maybe you don't go get Kenneth Murray and you get somebody else that's cheaper. Like maybe that's the trade-off there. But I'm not suggesting it's a huge amount of money and that you couldn't do both. But you can't take it with you over a number of years. You can roll some of it over, but you want to keep some of that for what you got coming up for next year.
You roll it over to spend it at some point. So this year was the year to finally spend it. But they find, to your point, they find Daryl Worley, who had 17 tackles. That's really too many tackles. That they're going at him to a degree, right. I think. But Daryl Worley is pretty good for what Daryl Worley is, right? Well, Daryl Worley, I think, has been free all season or most of the season. So Daryl Worley's the kind of guy you could have gotten for what you're talking about, veteran depth early in the year who could play good special teams. So Daryl Worley, if he was there at the beginning of the year, should have had it at the beginning of the year. Dennard Wilson knows him. He was with him last year, and you should have had Daryl Worley if he was around earlier.
Eddie, I think, makes a good point here. Washington had 6 top 100 draft picks. Titans had 2. Quinn is an experienced Super Bowl level head coach. Kiffin is Cliff is an experienced OC. I think there's some of that is all true. I think the quarterback is probably the bigger thing. But again, Rand had a chance, and again, I suppose one day we'll understand what percentage of the front office and head coaching staff wanted Will Levis. Maybe we never learned that. Or
what I've learned is that they were all about equally into him.
That's kind of my understanding. Is that at that pick in the draft, there wasn't much debate between the two sides. Like picking at 11, where they picked Skoronski, there was a larger debate about who was of value at that spot. That's what I understand too. But number 2 is a different pick than number 33. I think it's okay to have different expectations. Yes, Quinn is a more established guy. I don't know about the OC. Like, I think Kingsbury's had a lot of bad moments too. So, I mean, he's had good chunks of time. So,
also, what did O'Connell have as experience coming into the league? Because he was allowed to do okay in his first year as a head coach last year. There have been a lot of guys who didn't call a lot of plays who've come into the league as head coaches and done a lot better than Brian Callahan did.
I mean,
and is doing.
Zach Taylor didn't do very well, but his first time as a head coach with a young quarterback, and it turned out to work out very well, right? Where Brian was. Not everything's created equal. Like LaFleur's another one that was one of the winningest head coaches in the history, but a lot of that's Rodgers and established program. So you got to have to go through all the context of all of these different situations. But I do think you can point to Washington with a great draft class, stability at the top of the organization, experience in certain roles. It's a pretty sound strategy to turn around a franchise that has been kind of a punchline for how long, Paul? Like it's been a punchline for a long time.
Couple decades. Eddie also saying, Washington had 6 top 100 draft picks. Well, you know what Rand Carthon's allowed to do? He's allowed to trade down. And he's shown us pretty much that he's afraid to trade down. He's afraid to trade down. He's over eager to trade up. Traded up, hasn't traded down.
And I do agree with Austin on this. And this is going to lead us right into our next question, which is the moral of this year will be too many first-timers in top positions in charge. I think that was apparent the first day of training camp when we're all out there going like, look how new this whole thing is from top to bottom. I'm trying to scroll up right here to find one.
Again, I mean, I think there have been regimes that have come in with similar circumstances and done just fine. So
I'm trying to go back. There's somebody who asked a question. I think maybe it was Sam. This was early on in the show. Says, I'm a bit burned out, but I realized very early on that this year was going to be a mulligan. Everyone needs growth top to bottom. I think they're doing that in the grand scheme of things. So that's going to be the last question on the show today. But I want to first, again, say thanks to Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Make sure you go check out both of those great local businesses in Nashville, Tennessee. Sister store for Sinkers is Bluegrass Beverages up in Hendersonville. They have been serving that community for over 50 years. A great business up there, owned locally by folks in Nashville. Again, Sinkers in East Nashville, 4-time liquor store of the year, craft beer retailer of the year, as voted on by you all as well. So go in there, great bourbon selection, great wine selection, huge beer fridge, all the other non-alc stuff and THC stuff, great stocking stuffer. So if you're looking to get something for the Christmas holiday, which if you go ahead and just do it now, just get all your shopping out of the way now. It's smart. You got great stuff at Sinkers, great stuff at Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. You can go get gift cards for either of them. It's great stuff. So go support 2 good local businesses. So ultimately, that's sort of my question here that I wanted to wrap up with was like, what is, I think there's a chance that this game was the worst that we're going to see from Dennard Wilson, that it's going to be the worst we're going to see sort of top to bottom in general, from front office to last guy on the roster. Special teams atrocious again. Penalties, sure, Levis wasn't bad, but I think ultimately, is it fair to ask for this organization to be competitive next year? Do fans need to sort of buckle up for the long haul? That as Sam said, it's about growth across the board. It's about young guys in key positions gaining experience, or inexperienced guys. Is that fair? Or do we need to see progress by the first month of next year? Like, what's the whole entire big picture rebuild? How long is it supposed to take in your mind?
Well, I mean, I don't think it matters, when the losses that come next year come. But if they're not competitive next year, we're talking about coach and GM searches at this time in December, probably in November. I mean, they've got to be a wild card contender at this stage of the year next year, I think, or this regime will be and should be in significant trouble. Again, a lot of teams have gone draft and develop. Now they've had more draft picks and maybe more to build around at the beginning, but turnarounds you don't get more than 2 years really to turn things around. And, it'd be one thing if all of the coaching stuff was going right and all of the failures were on execution and playing. but it's not. They're not no huddling to hurry up. There are plenty of coaching factors. The penalties are a team discipline issue. The false starting is happening before the snap. How are you not settling that down? We're not seeing improvements in areas like that are a direct line to coaching. We're not seeing a guy that can catch and not fumble punts. That's a drafting mistake issue. And so I think, and this is presuming that she's not Amy Adams Strunk isn't, that doesn't make a move now. And we, after the season's over, I don't think she would with Callahan. I'm not positive she won't with somebody in the front office, because she gets those urges sometimes and acts on them. But I'm presuming people are going to be in place, and I'm presuming they're going to be under heavy pressure for next year to be a much, much better season, which means that this free agent class from this year going to have to get healthy and productive in a way that it wasn't this year outside of a couple of guys that draft and develop. We're going to have to see big things from the guys who've been good in this draft class and some who haven't. And then another draft class of heavy and early influence.
So Austin mentioned this. They wanted Campbell out after the first year, 3 wins. Second year, they had 8. Third year, now they're at the top of the league. What's interesting is we have used Dan Campbell as an example of slow progress before, because he was 4-19-1. 4-19-1. I cannot imagine Brian Callahan is still employed, whether it's his fault or not. I don't, 4-19-1 is hard to believe. Let's say they're 4-13. So I'm going to go down the 4-19-1 path here for a second. Let's say they're 4-13 this year, which is one more win the rest of the year. Not out of the question. I don't think that's what I would pick. I think I'd probably be more in the 5-12 range. If they then start out, have a bad month or two, the question is then, like, what does Levis look like if they add more pieces around him? They get him Luther Burden in the first round or something along those lines, and he steps back, and Callahan can say in closed meetings to folks, that wasn't my guy to begin with. That may keep Callahan employed. Or I agree with you, it's about this time next year where fans need to see actual progress. Because even if you start out, let's say you go 4 or 5 wins this year, and then you start out like 2-4 next year, people are going to be clamoring for his head, for all these folks' heads. But if you then start to see progress over the next month or two, and you get to December, and you're talking about a 6-6 team, I think that's when you fight. You need to get to the near this time next year, I think, is when fans need to be prepared to start. Then they're allowed to have some verdicts, I feel like, is this time next year. That's end of Rand's third year, end of Callahan's second year, end of Levis's third year. I think that's when you can start to make some definitive statements. I just think I wanted to have a quick, I know it's more of an off-season conversation, but I wanted to have a quick conversation about, like, what is the long-term prognostication on all of this? And where do we need to start kind of putting some stuff in the sand, saying, it may not happen the first month of next year. It may not happen the rest of this year. It may not be in the offseason. But I think it's about this time next year where you have to say, we need to see something. Or we know what we've got.
And they could win 4. They could win 6. I don't know where it's going to go. I feel like yesterday was a real killer.
It's bad.
But whether it's 4, whether it's 5, whether it's 6, I think next year you got to get to 9.
9 wins. Okay.
I do. A winning record is a really big deal. And that's where Campbell got to. I think they won.
I think it was 8,
9 and 8.
I think it was the other way around, but I think that the point, like, my vision of it is you need to be competing one game out of a wild card spot for probably the last 3 weeks of the year. Like, you need to be in the conversation. And if you're in the conversation, you don't have to get there. You don't have to have a winning record. You don't have to make the playoffs, but you have put your team, you've made clear progress, and your team is in the race for the playoffs. It's a huge step forward from where they are today, because when you fire the coach and you change culture and you change the GM, you have to take steps backwards before you can take steps forwards. It's just not, it doesn't.
I think also the conversation next year matters. There can't be a right tackle conversation going on during next season. There can't be an edge rusher, absence of an edge rusher conversation going on next season. There can't be why is there no young wide receiver conversation going on next season. That the need, the drastic need circle has gotten smaller, and they can't fail to address those things. If they do, those are fireable offenses right out of the gate before it starts.
Yep, I think that is all very, very fair stuff. And I think Jason says it right. Next week is a big week. Mac Jones, another backup quarterback coming to Nissan Stadium. Mac Jones versus Will Levis, the battle of future Titans quarterbacks. Let's hope one of those is not a part of the conversation. Although Alabama fans would be so happy about that. I did think it was a couple of observations, like the hit on Trevor Lawrence, because that was a former Titan, of course, Azeez Al-Shaair. I don't know if there's backstory between him and Trevor Lawrence, but that was I didn't think so either. I was trying to figure out if he had, they
it would have come out by now if there was.
I thought so too, and that was a vicious, illegal, clearly illegal hit. It's one of those where it's one of those where I asked hey, I tell the wife, hey, come in here and look at this. And she just goes, oh, I'm so glad we have daughters. Like that kind of thing where it's just holy, what that, man, it was bad looking. It was bad. So Mac Jones,
I think it warrants 2-game suspension. I think he'll probably only get 1, but I think it warrants 2. He's become, the league's bad guy. He had a bad one against Chicago and mixed it up with somebody else too. It's quite a turn. Quite a turn.
Yeah, it feels like I talked to him a bunch last year, and he seems like one of the smarter, more thoughtful commenters about the team and the defense, and very aware of what's going on. Very thoughtful guy. I don't know. It seems like an odd turn for him. I agree with you. Very interesting. But man, that hit was vicious and scary, and it's why we love football and why we are concerned about its future all together at the same time. All right, PK, what do you got coming up? Obviously, Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Woods Barbecue, but go to paulkuharsky.com. Sign up for good coverage of your Tennessee Titans. What you got for the good folks?
Yeah, well, I've got something coming about pocket awareness, how you learn pocket awareness, where Will Levis is in that process. And if you haven't visited the site, this is the 25th year of the Tennessee Titans. And though it's been a bad one, I did spend a good share last week putting together my all Titans team for the 25 years. So some tough decisions in there and some good reminiscing. So I would encourage you to head to paulkuharsky.com to read that.
The hardest decision for you was who?
Well, I had 3 offensive tackles, and I didn't want to go all left tackle. I'll say that. And grouped together 6 linebackers, which includes inside and outside. And we know they've been 3-4 and 4-3. So that was difficult as well.
Steve McNair, quarterback 1. Who is quarterback? Who would be quarterback 2, 3, and 4 in order?
I try to keep them in order as I did them, though they're not ranked. Well, quarterback 2 is very clearly Ryan Tannehill.
And number 3?
And there is a quarterback 3 that I begrudgingly put on there.
Zach Mettenberger.
Exactly. And that's why people are going to have to go on there and read it.
Paul Kuharsky makes case for headline. Kuharsky makes case for Mettenberger to be 3rd greatest quarterback in Titans franchise history.
It's hard to do, but I talked to Wisenhunt and he convinced me.
Well, and such a joy to talk to Ken Wisenhunt all the time.
Yeah.
All right, paulkuharsky.com, Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. We do appreciate all you guys in the comment section. Nick Suss and I are back on Thursday. Of course, you got PK's pod on Thursdays as well. And then, of course, following every single Titans games on Sunday. So make sure you check that out. All the other great shows across the network, including Titans coverage from JT and Stoney as on the
I thought it was Easton.
As on the Hot Read podcast, as well as, of course, both Justin's on the Music City Audible. Got SEC Football Live with me and Stephen Godfrey through the end of this thing, as a lot of SEC teams are going to scrap and claw and see if they can get into the playoff this upcoming weekend. So lots of stuff going on in the state of Tennessee. And, of course, 440 Sports has you covered. paulkuharsky.com as well. Paul, thanks always, man. Pleasure hanging out with you. Glad to see you back in town and warm and not affected by the cold. Your stories were well written, and the podcast was done, not affected by the cold. You did a good job.
Excuses from me.
No excuses. There you go. All right. We'll talk to you guys on Thursday. Have a good week, everybody. Thank you all for listening.
Sure.